So in my day job, I work as an SEO content writer, and as you guys can tell, I'm heavily invested in AI. So, using some common sense, I decided to combine those skills. And then I created a massive prompt that could help me write content better. And I thought I was a freaking genius, you know? I made this prompt get the client's tone of voice, the business, like notes on the industry, so I know the industry ins and outs, I know what I'm writing about. I also made it help me do copy ideas and draft copy. And I had some other prompts up my sleeve as well. And I thought, man, I'm a freaking genius. Like, this is working well, but over time, as the conversation got longer, the outputs would gradually get worse. And I would notice that the tone of voice would just completely die. And I thought, right, I'm going to go add some more instructions because, the tone of voice is failing away. Maybe I should add some instructions about writing better. And that didn't work. And so I thought, okay, Claude's popular now. I'm going to switch from GPT to Claude, which again, I ran into the same problems. Tone of voice fell away, just got gradually worse. And then I got to a point where I realized, man, I'm going to have to swallow my pride and figure out what the actual solution is. Because I fell into the trap of adding instructions and switching between models. And these are the exact problems that most people run into. And that's what I'm going to go into in today's video. I'm going to show you the mistakes that I made and show you the solutions and how I made this prompt go from being absolute garbage to something that consistently works and keeps on working. And part of the mistakes I made are I see what other people do as well. So I want to go into those and show you guys the mistakes other people make, the mistakes you might be making, the same mistakes that I made, and the solutions so you can get better working agent prompts. So why would you want to listen to me? As I said before, I work as an SEO content writer, and I also use AI a lot where I work for. We're also doing a bunch of AI projects, kind of working on here and there. I've also got my own personal AI agent sort of set up for small to medium businesses. So what I'm saying is that I'm not some random tech bro LARPer content creator trying to sell you an AI course. I actually use AI instead of just LARPing about it. That's basically what I'm trying to say. Now, let's get into the nitty gritty of it all. First, I want to go over why these performance dips happen. But I'm going to start with this meme. I personally thought it was quite funny. And this is the midwit meme. So with any kind of skill that you're trying to learn, there's two ends of the spectrum. There's level 0 here, knows absolutely nothing. And then we got the master here. And they both end up on the same conclusion. I have edited the master part here, but the same principle kind of applies. But we have this sort of midwit area, which is what I was in, and I find that a lot of people are kind of in when they're using AI for their day-to-day job. They're trying to overcomplicate things, and that's what the midwit part of this meme is, like you're learning all these different things, you're overthinking, you think you need to add this, add that, switch between this model, but the core skill is prompt engineering, with some additions which I will elaborate on later in the video. But this is where we want to be. We want to have good prompt engineering skills, understanding, and then we can add some tools. Bit of a teaser for what's going on later. But the problems that people run into, even when they add instructions and switch between models, are these 5 here. Now they run into LLMs losing the middle instructions, and when there's too many rules, the model will pick the winners and losers. It's the content as the chat gets longer, results quietly get worse, and then that's when default behavior kicks in. So yeah, some of these quotes here in this yellow box just back some of these core principles. Especially the second one here. Models attend well to the beginning and end. That's, we're talking about before. They don't read in a straight line. They take things at the beginning, at the end, the most in, and then underways things in the middle. And then when it starts to underway certain instructions, that's when it chooses to default back to its training, its default behavior. And then things get worse, contexts are up, yada, yada, yada. All right, so I've gone ahead and just moved this widget here so you can see the yellow box there, read the article quotes, and I'll leave the links to the articles in the description below. But let's get into the problems that people run into. So most people think, I'll just change the model. I'll go to the better thinking model. Maybe you can think harder. Oh, this model is better. It's human nature. We see something better. Okay, that might be the solution. But regardless of whether you switch from GPT to Claude to Gemini to frickin' Grok, and even if you go from the everyday one to the thinking one, you're still gonna run into the same 5 problems. And you'll still find that the middle instructions will get underweight, the middle of the conversation will get rotted out, things slowly get worse, default behavior kicks in, and then it'll pick and choose winning instructions. So the next conclusion is, why don't I just add more instructions? But you're still going to find the same problems time and time again. The LLM will lose it in the middle, and since there's more instructions, it'll really start to pick winners and losers, and especially happens as the context gets longer and longer. Results slowly get worse, and then default behavior kicks in, especially when it picks winners and losers. That's when the default behavior really shines. Now, let's get into the prompt before I made the big change. As I said before, I added way too much to this prompt. I told it was a copywriter, it's creative, in-depth knowledge on branding and copywriting and styles, seamlessly blends technical SEO and teaching and ideation. Far too much going on, and this is just the first section. So task, as I said before, I made it provide a big analysis on the client, services, USPs, brand. And then after that, that's when it's creating copy ideas and helping me learn more about the business, a niche, bunch of other things going on here and there. And then, as I said at the start, I realized, wow, the writing style is getting absolutely cooked. Like, it's just getting worse and worse. So I thought, I'm going to add some copywriting instructions. I got to a point where I realized there's a lot more I want to include in here, but I can't because the prompt is getting so much worse. And I still ran into the exact same problems that I talked about before. I added instructions, went from GPT to Claude, and I still had too many instructions. The results would get gradually worse. And as I said before, I was memorizing certain instructions anyway. And then I realized something has to change. So I thought, I'm going to go and refine the prompt and add some tools to it. So here's the prompt before, and here's the prompt after. And this has been so much better. Alright, so if you guys want to know what just happened, I just went ahead and cleaned up the lighting a bit. It still doesn't look great, but bear with me. Anyway, let's get into how I fixed this prompt. So the first thing I did was go back to some basic prompt engineering practices. Going back to things like role prompting, one-shot prompting, few-shot, emotion prompt. Going back to these practices just helped me, refine the prompt a lot more and to get rid of all these unnecessary instructions. Because at the time I just thought, I already know this stuff, I don't need to, consider it too much. But again, I needed to go back to basics and restructure it immensely. And these techniques, they go into how, well, you apply them based on how LLMs read instructions, again, helping your outputs, and these practices account for, how they perform over time. Helped me to go back to keeping in mind of context, right? And thinking, like restructuring the prompt to get away from that context depletion. And that meant to go back to these practices. And you can see on the right here, got this sort of framework thing, which I'll show you guys in the next slide now. And so here's an example framework. Everyone's got their own different sort of frameworks, but this is a general sort of template that I like to go back to because it ties into some of these core prompting principles. So the role prompting, task, chain of thought prompting, where you're just elaborating on that task. An emotion prompt, you're giving it more specifics, more notes on the task and the context on the task, but also chucking in some little instructions on how good they are. Hence the emotion prompt. Examples here. Again, here we have few shot prompting. I guess this part will kind of get lost, but it's easy enough for the LLM to to read and understand. Things that are lost in the middle, a few little notes, and there you go. And now the next fix was obviously consolidating the prompt, but it was mainly consolidating the tasks. As I showed before, there was a bunch of random instructions, just throwing it in there, hoping for the best. But so much better. I'll actually do that. It was so much better to go from this mess of instructions to here. Even though it's longer, it's a lot more concise, The 3 tasks are detailed and there's good little descriptions on what to do with each. Just going back to applying those practices and applying that chain of thought prompting. I'll move this guy back here. And then the next, hang on. Nice. And then the next fix was adding skills files. Now, skills files are basically just files with instructions, and these are tools you can just call whenever you want. So let's say I'm going to write some FAQs. I'm going to say write the FAQ skill. And this ties back to how I was just remembering a bunch of random prompts. So turning them into skills files has been amazing because, again, as I said before, you can just call them whenever you want. And some of these instructions, well, pretty much all of them aren't instructions I can put into the main system prompt. See, these things here, back to the core principles, requires some few shot prompting. Because to be able to write the metas, I've got to give it instructions on how I write metas best. And that'd be quite hard to put in that big system prompt without blowing it out, context depletion, and tokens as well. So, those were the 3 main fixes. Now, let's get into the prompt and how I changed each section. Far out. Alright, so quickly, again, looking at the after prompt, as you can see, a lot more concise, less words, and again, less tokens, less context depletion. And there you go. So before on the left side, we have this mess of instructions and word salad of a role, and then on the right here, consolidating it a lot more. And just focusing on the writing capability, but with a little sentence on the end that lead into the other main tasks, analysis and research type of deal. As I mentioned before in that little Drake meme, consolidated the tasks before, told it to do a massive business analysis and then create copy ideas and then do research. But in here, we've clarified that it does the analysis, the writing, and the research as main universal tasks with little descriptions about each. On the left here, before, I just whacked in a few instructions. It's pretty lazy, but on the right here, it is longer, but it is a lot better because there are little elaborations on each main task. And the context, on the left here, this was kind of lazy, but it was decent. So on the right here, kept some of the same stuff, but just fixed it up a bit, and added some little mentions that reinforce those two other main tasks, reinforcing that it analyzes the business and helps with research. And this is where we really went into the culling here, was to get rid of just random copy guidelines, general copywriting, and keywords instructions, but making skills files and then little instructions on the skills files. So it just makes it a lot easier to add other skills and more tools I can call whenever I need to. And then on the notes, just getting rid of some of these random notes that I just chucked in, and I had actually added more copywriting guidelines, but as I said before, I've put those in a skills file, and now I can write some better notes for more general purposes. So I'm just going to quickly explain the skills files here. So actually, let's go back here. See this file structure. Skills files are basically files with instructions, and you can set it up with files in files. So with this file here, I have skill.md. Let's quickly go back to, this one here. It says to go to the file path, which is this is the main file, SEO writing agent skills, and read skill.md. So what I've done here is had this file called skill.md, and it just quickly shows the LLM how to read or how to use each skill file and what they're about. Just quick little instructions about this is this file, this does this, and it makes it easier for when I want to add more files. And this is a quick introduction on the FAQ skill file. And again, as I said, it's just a file with a huge list of instructions. And I don't really want to, just whack it all in there. Otherwise, you'd just be scrolling. But yeah, there's just more instructions. I'll probably put it in the description if I can. But you can just make sure whenever you do these, they're concise. Sometimes when you get AI to do it, it'll just waffle on. You might burn tokens, but yeah, just make sure they're concise. Make sure it's purposeful and gets the job done pretty much. But the good thing about these is that the LLM will read these instructions once. Now, you don't always have to be like, just keep calling the skill file all the time. You can just use it once, and it'll have it in its context. So when it goes to message you again, it'll have these FAQ instructions, and then, actually I'll move that there. It'll have these FAQ instructions, and then just be like, hey, I need to do FAQs for this, this, and that, and then it'll just do it anyway, without having to call the skills file if it's already called it. And yeah, let's get into what problems were solved. Basically, it just solved all the 5 problems we had before. The LLM losing in the middle, all the competing rules, context rot, quality slowly getting worse, and default behavior. These have been removed significantly. Even though quality will still get worse, there's steps in place to fix that. And that's what I did with writing reset here. Basically a skill, if I notice the tone of voice is getting absolutely cooked, just be like, hey, writing reset time. Let's run this skill. And then, it'll load those instructions and then go back to writing some good copy. And yeah, even though it can default to its behavior, the quality can slowly get worse. There's that skill to be like, give it that little reminder, hey, go back to writing some good copy. And now it's easier to add extra sections. So what I mean by that, let's say I add a Google search engine results API N8N tool, and it does other things in the background. So what I can do, I can hook up that tool and just be like, hey, use this tool whenever the user wants to get top 3 URLs from a Google search query, blah, blah, blah. It adds to the prompt, doesn't completely blow out the tokens, and we're sweet. So what now? Hopefully you can be like this guy. You can be the master. You can be a G at prompt engineering. Obviously with any kind of skill, takes some practice, takes some time, but hopefully with some of these lessons, you can become like this guy. And how do you become like this guy? You can understand some prompt engineering concepts, one shot, few shot prompting, role prompting, chain of thought, emotion prompt, differences between system and user prompts. That's pretty key as well. How LLMs read instructions, how they perform over time, things like that. When understand these things, you play around with it, you start to realize how you can prompt these LLMs better. And reading some articles, seeing what other people say, how people have failed, certain studies, you can see, I might be doing this wrong, so maybe I can take this guy's solution and just create better prompts. Skill files as well. I think this is it's a game changer. I think this is really good. Sorry. I think this is really good. If you have Claude, you can just ask how to create it. I mean, you can do it with GPT. But there's heaps of guides. Obviously, YouTube videos. Anthropic has heaps of resources. And obviously, you can use these skill files for any model. You just whack into GPT or Gemini, give it instructions, and that's pretty much it. And this is how I fixed my prompt and how I fell into those mistakes and went back to basics and fixed it up. Hope this helps you, and I hope this helps you understand how you can prompt agents better. And as I said before, the template that I showed, it's not going to work for everyone. Maybe you've got some different ideas, some different practices. Just trying to, show some of my learnings, and hopefully, you can take bits and pieces, and I hope it helps. But I'll leave whatever resources I can in the description below, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a good one. See yous around.